Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something pretty foundational in cybersecurity.
Absolutely. A really key document.
Think of us as your guides, maybe your instructors, as we tackle Appendix A of NIST Special Publication 837, Revision 2.
Yep. SP 837 R2, Appendix A. That's the one.
Our mission really is to pull out the key knowledge about the authorization process, within the risk management framework, the RMF,
The A in RMS, basically.
and make it super clear why getting this appendix is, well, it's just vital if you're serious about managing information system risk effectively.
Couldn't agree more. Understanding this is crucial.
Okay, so let's kick things off. What's the big picture here? What are we actually doing with authorization in the RMF context?
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it? Fundamentally, authorization, this whole process detailed in Appendix A, it's about formally accepting the risk.
Accepting the risk. Okay.
It's that point where the organization, through a specific person, the authorizing official, looks at everything and says, okay, we see the security risks, we see the privacy risks, and we're making a conscious choice to operate anyway.
A formal sign-off on the risk level.
Exactly. So let's maybe break down the different ways this happens, starting with initial authorization.
Right. Initial. It sounds like the very beginning. What's the deal with that first approval?
Precisely. Initial authorization is exactly that. It's the first time a system, or maybe a set of common controls shared across systems, gets the okay to operate.
Go live, basically.
Yeah, go live. It's based on that first big assessment of how secure it is, what the privacy posture looks like. Think of it like getting clearance for a new aircraft model to fly. You do rigorous checks first.
You need that assurance before it takes off.
Exactly. It confirms the inherent risks are understood and deemed acceptable to start.
Okay, so that's the starting line. But, systems and threats change constantly. Which brings us to ongoing authorization. This feels important.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Ongoing authorization is a huge shift. It moves away from that single point-in-time approval.
Like, we checked it once, we're good for 3 years. That model.
Right, that older model. Instead, ongoing authorization is about a continuous cycle. You're always monitoring, always evaluating risk.
More like a continuous health check.
That's a great analogy, like a fitness tracker for your system, not just an annual physical. It's watching vital signs constantly. The aim is near real-time risk understanding.
So you can make decisions proactively, not just reactively.
Precisely. In today's world, with threats evolving so fast, you need that dynamic view.
Makes total sense.
Okay.
Initial, ongoing. And the third one is reauthorization. What's that about? Another check.
Reauthorization is like a scheduled or sometimes unscheduled deep dive. Even if you have ongoing monitoring, reauthorization forces a more comprehensive look periodically.
Why, if you're monitoring continuously?
Well, it ensures the system still operates within acceptable risk levels over the longer term. It could be triggered by time, say every 3 years, or by a major event.
Like what kind of event?
Oh, maybe a significant system upgrade, a major security breach, maybe fundamental changes in how data is processed. It's a chance to reassess the whole picture, make sure the original risk decisions still hold water.
Got it. Initial, ongoing, and then these periodic or event-driven reauthorizations. So to make any of these decisions, the person in charge needs info. That's the authorization package, right?
Exactly. The authorization package is, well, it's the foundation for the decision. It's the collection of all the documents. The authorizing official, the AO, needs to make an informed, risk-based choice.
It's the case file.
Perfect way to put it. It's the evidence that shows the system's security and privacy status and justifies why it should be allowed to operate or continue operating.
Okay, so what absolutely has to be in this package? What are the non-negotiables?
Appendix A is pretty clear on the key components. First up, you need the security and privacy plans.
The blueprints.
Yeah, exactly. They lay out the system's security and privacy requirements and detail all the controls chosen to meet them. It's like the system's rule book or constitution for security and privacy.
Hitting the ground rules.
Okay, what else? Next, you absolutely need the security and privacy assessment reports. These SARS and PA, they show the results of actually testing the controls.
So not just the plan, but proof it's working.
Precisely. They give an objective look at whether the controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome. It's the quality control check. And it's worth noting, like the document says, specific guidance for privacy assessment reports was still developing then, but the need to assess privacy controls is definitely there.
Right, the principle matters. So the assessment reports show if things are working. What if they find problems? weaknesses.
That leads directly to the next critical piece, the Plan of Action and Milestones, the POAM.
The POAM, always hear about that.
Yeah.
Yep. The POAM is basically the fix-it list. It details every task needed to correct the weaknesses found in the assessments. Who's responsible, what resources are needed, key dates, completion targets. It's all in there.
The roadmap to remediation.
Exactly. Turning weaknesses into strengths with a documented plan.
Okay, plans, reports, the fix-it list. What else? You need something for the busy executive, right?
She nailed it. That's the executive summary. It's the condensed version, the high-level brief.
The cliff notes for the AL.
Pretty much. It highlights the most critical risk management issues for the system and its environment. Lets the AO quickly grasp the essentials for their decision without getting lost in, hundreds of pages of technical detail.
A vital snapshot. Now, the appendix mentions this isn't always paper and manual effort. It hints at automation. How does that fit in?
Yes, and that's increasingly important. Appendix A points out that you can generate big chunks of this package using automated tools, security engagement tools, privacy tools.
Makes sense. Cuts down the manual work.
Absolutely. Different organizations are at different levels of maturity with this, of course. But the trend is clear. Automation helps streamline everything, makes it more efficient, and, crucially, gets more timely, accurate risk info to the AO.
Faster, better data for decisions. Okay, so the package is built, maybe with some automation help. It lands on the desk, virtual or real, of the authorizing official. What's their main job now?
The AO is the ultimate decision maker. Their core job is to analyze everything in that package, all the evidence, and then determine if the remaining risk, the risk that's left after controls are applied, is acceptable to the organization. It's a balancing act. Business needs versus potential security or privacy harm.
Okay, so they analyze the risk. What can they actually do about it? What are their options?
The main responses are acceptance and mitigation. If the risk is within the organization's tolerance levels, the AO can just accept it and grant the authorization.
Okay, we can live at this level of risk.
Right. But if the risk is too high, they'll require mitigation. And those mitigation actions, they go right back into the POAM we just talked about.
So the POAM gets updated with required fixes.
Exactly. And then, crucially, after those fixes are done, you often need to reassess those specific controls to make sure the fix actually worked and reduce the risk like intended.
A feedback loop. Analyze, mitigate, track in the POAM, retest.
You got it. It's iterative until the risk is acceptable.
Okay, so after all that analysis and maybe mitigation, we get to the authorization decision itself. What are the possible outcomes? Is it just yes or no?
It's a bit more nuanced. The most common positive outcome is the authorization to operate, the ATO. That's the formal, go ahead.
The green light.
The green light, but it often comes with strings attached specific terms and conditions. Maybe it's only authorized for certain functions, or maybe it has an authorization termination date.
An expiry date.
Yep, an expiration date for the approval, which really drives home that authorization isn't permanent. It needs revisiting.
Good point. What other kinds of decisions can be made?
Well, there's a common control authorization. Very similar to an ATO, but it's specifically for those controls that are shared across multiple systems.
Like the central firewall rules or identity management system?
Exactly. Things multiple systems inherit. Then there's authorization to use. This might come up when a full ATO isn't quite right, maybe with external providers where you don't have full control, so it's based more on trust and assessed risk of using their service.
A bit more conditional, maybe?
Could be. And finally, the flip side. If the AO looks at everything and decides the risk is just fundamentally unacceptable,
Then to the no.
then it's a denial of authorization. Full stop. The risk is too great.
Okay, so ATO, common control authorization, authorization to use, or denial. A range of possibilities based on risk. Now, once the decision is made, people need to know, right? How does that reporting work?
Absolutely essential step. Communication is key. The decision needs to go to all the relevant folks in the organization, especially important if the AO power has been delegated downwards.
Got to keep everyone in the loop.
And importantly, if there are serious, exploitable weaknesses found that represent significant risk, those must be reported upwards. Appendix A even suggests using something like the NIST cybersecurity framework categories to help communicate the severity of those risks.
So flag the really dangerous stuff, clearly.
Right. And the appendix also mentions, sort of as an option, that organizations can track these authorization decisions centrally, maybe in their system registration database, for better overall visibility and governance.
Makes sense for oversight. Okay, we touched on it earlier, but let's dive a bit deeper into ongoing authorization. You said it's a big shift. What does that really mean day to day?
It means thinking about security and privacy not just at specific checkpoints, but all the time as part of the system's normal life cycle. It's about building in monitoring and risk assessment from the start and keeping it running.
So it becomes part of the operational rhythm.
Exactly. The goal is to spot emerging threats or control failures much faster and respond quicker, making the whole system more resilient.
And what actually triggers these ongoing reviews? Is it just random checks?
No, Appendix A lays out two main types of triggers. You've got time-driven triggers. These are your regular scheduled reviews, maybe quarterly, maybe annually, based on whatever frequency the organization decides is appropriate.
The routine checkups.
Right. But then, critically, you also have event-driven triggers. These happen immediately when something significant changes.
We mentioned examples like OS changes.
Yeah, or maybe changes to how sensitive data like PII is processed, adding new hardware, a significant change in system interconnections, discovery of a major new vulnerability, things like that.
And these event-driven reviews are in addition to the time-driven ones.
Absolutely. It's not either. It's both. Regular checks plus immediate responses to significant events, that's how you maintain continuous vigilance.
Gotcha. And I guess this is where automation, which we mentioned with the package, becomes really vital again for ongoing monitoring.
Totally critical. Appendix A really emphasizes this, trying to do effective ongoing authorization manually across many systems. It's just not feasible. You need automated tools.
But do what, exactly?
To continuously collect security data, monitor if controls are still working, analyze logs, maybe even run automated scans, and then feed that near real-time risk picture back to the authorizing officials. Automation makes continuous practical.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, shifting gears slightly,
Yeah.
what about when the responsibility isn't just on one person's shoulders? Appendix A talks about traditional versus joint authorizations. What's the difference?
Good question. So traditional authorization is the standard model. One single authorizing official holds the final responsibility. They own the risk decision for that system or those common controls.
The book stocks with them.
Pretty much. But in joint authorization, you have multiple AOs who share that responsibility and risk acceptance.
Why would you do that?
Often happens when systems cross organizational boundaries, like interagency projects, or when using shared services where multiple departments or agencies have a significant stake and rely on it.
So shared system, shared risk.
Exactly. The key thing with joint authorization is you absolutely need clear agreements up front. Who's responsible for what, how decisions get made collectively, how risk is shared. It all needs to be documented and agreed upon. Collaboration is paramount.
Formalizing that shared accountability.
Yeah.
Okay, what about really big, complex systems? Does Appendix A offer guidance on breaking them down? It mentions system subsystems and authorization.
It does, and breaking down complex systems into smaller, more manageable subsystems can be really beneficial for security.
How so?
Well, it lets you apply controls more granularly. You can use principles like network segmentation or domain separation more effectively to contain potential problems, better security posture overall, potentially.
Makes sense. Smaller chunks are easier to secure. How does the documentation work then? Separate plans for each subsystem.
Organizations have options. You could create separate security and privacy plans for each subsystem, or you could address them within the main systems plan, maybe as annexes. The key is that the controls for each subsystem are clearly defined and assessed.
What if the subsystems have different security needs, like one handles public data, another handles highly sensitive data?
That's a critical consideration. If subsystems have different security categorizations, you have to pay very close attention to the interfaces between them. How does data flow? What controls protect those connections? You need to ensure a lower security subsystem can't become a weak point that compromises a higher security one.
Secure the pieces, but absolutely secure the connections between the pieces.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, one last major area Appendix A touches on, and it's hugely relevant today: external providers and authorization. Cloud services, SaaS, third-party vendors. How does authorization work there?
Yeah, this is a big challenge. Authorizing systems or services provided by external entities. It's tricky. The main issue is trust and assurance.
Because you don't have direct control.
Well, exactly. You often have limited visibility into their environment, limited control over their security practices. Things might change quickly on their end without you knowing immediately. Plus, often these services are critical to your own operations.
So how do organizations handle that lack of direct control?
Well, sometimes you can rely on established trust relationships or frameworks. Think about using cloud providers that are already FedRAMP authorized, for instance. That provides a baseline level of assurance.
Leveraging existing certifications.
Right. Or an organization might just analyze the risks of exchanging information with that provider and decide to accept that specific risk. But what if that trust isn't enough or the assurance isn't there?
What are the options then?
Appendix A suggests a few paths. You could implement compensating controls on your end to try and mitigate the risks from the external provider. Or the organization might have to formally accept a higher level of risk, understanding the potential downsides. Another option is to simply choose a different provider who offers better security assurances.
Or just don't use the service.
Or, as a last resort, yes. If the risk associated with using that external provider is deemed unacceptable and can't be mitigated sufficiently, the organization might have to forego using the service altogether. It all comes back to that risk-based decision.
A complex balancing act, especially with external dependencies. Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground from Appendix A there.
We certainly have. Just to quickly recap the highlights, we talked about the different authorization types: initial, ongoing, reauthorization. We stressed the importance of the authorization package as the evidence base.
Right, with the plans, assessment reports, POAM, and executive summary.
Exactly. And the huge shift towards ongoing authorization, driven by both time and events and enabled by automation.
We also covered joint versus traditional authorization, handling subsystems.
And finally, those unique challenges and considerations when dealing with external providers.
It really paints a clear picture. This authorization process, it's not just paperwork, is it? It's the mechanism for formally managing and accepting risk.
Absolutely. It's how organizations operationalize risk management for their IT systems. And like you said at the start, understanding these concepts is fundamental for anyone in cybersecurity, risk, IT governance. Really anyone responsible for protecting information.
A solid grasp of Appendix A seems like table stakes for understanding the RMF authorized step and building a strong security posture.
Couldn't agree more. It's foundational knowledge.
Okay, so to wrap up, here's something to think about, a final thought for you, the listener. We see this massive, accelerating reliance on cloud, on SaaS, on intricate supply chains of third-party vendors.
Yeah.
How do these traditional authorization processes we've just discussed, outlined in Appendix A, need to change? How must they evolve to cope with these incredibly complex, distributed, often opaque ecosystems? What kind of innovative approaches might we need to effectively authorize systems in the future?
That's a great question to ponder. The landscape is definitely shifting.
Something to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.